Okay.
Good morning, Sarah.
Good
We're
morning,
back.
Chris. How are you? It's
I'm
Friday
good.
morning.
It is, and I'm glad to be with you. I'm a little sad not to be next to you in person, but Zoom has proven we don't have to commute everywhere, right?
It's true. We can do some of what we need to do sitting in our own homes. So it's good to hang out with you, even though you're 80 miles away today.
Likewise. A lot going on in the climate front here in Vermont and around the world, hopefully. So have you had the chance to get to one of the public forums that the Climate Council is hosting?
Yeah, I have not. And, they did a series of in-person listening sessions, very carefully choreographed to allow folks to share information and digest some of what is contained in the plan. There's a couple more that are virtual, so we certainly hope that folks have had a chance to get to either one of the in-person or the virtual ones. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience? You attended the one that was in Colchester, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting. It wasn't overwhelming. But I was impressed. There were couple of secretaries of the administration were there. I would say sort of maybe 50, 60 people, a lot of folks that came to our meetings and I know to be engaged in the climate movement more generally. It was a good discussion. I was a little worried. I am a little worried that it wasn't reaching a lot of new people. And, I continue to think that people watching us and way beyond in the grassroots are really vital to whether or not we can pull off meaningful action.
This is a perfect opportunity for us to invite folks who are watching this to send it along and share this video with some of your friends and neighbors who are interested in climate action, because we're going to be diving in deep today to some of the components that we expect will come out of the subcommittees and make their way into the climate plan. And we're going to need Vermonters to petition their legislators to move some of these things forward, to make it clear to the governor that we need all agencies of state government pulling their part of the load here in moving our climate action.
Yeah, that's right. And so the most interesting thing for me of the meeting was we start to get a preview of maybe what will be the climate plan. And that's what we want to spend a little bit of time looking at today. So there was a handout. As folks may know, the Climate Council has subcommittees, each of them digging into whether it's energy or ag and ecosystems and other subject areas and coming up with some bullet plans. And then that is what was shared at these meetings. Mm-hmm. Some version of that gets bound together into the climate plan.
Yeah,
we assume.
Yeah.
So let's just go for it and give people a little preview of what we're thinking or what we're hearing. Why don't you start?
Why don't you tell us what you learned about some of the recommendations that may come around renewable energy?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and this is sort of boring in a way, but we have actually been doing okay on energy because we've had what's called the Comprehensive Energy Plan. And now I think we're on the third plan. It's being drafted right now, and that gets updated by the state every 5 or 10 years. I can't recall exactly. And that has promoted a lot of renewable development and informed policymakers as we set our grid and energy policies. So that process, which started 15 years ago, is also happening right now. So they said, in terms of energy, we're working on the Comprehensive Energy Plan. Yeah. So you kind of got to peel back one more layer, but they did talk about a few recommendations. Some of them will sound familiar, Sarah. Implement 100% renewable energy standard to replace the 75% target. Now, for our regular viewers, and there's thousands of you, we know, and we appreciate that. that was a push we had several years ago coming out of the work from the Climate Solutions Caucus of legislators. And we got, and actually the 100%, moving to 100% renewable, our current standard is aiming at 75% renewable. That was kind of the easy part. Several of our utilities are already doing that, but there it is. It's back to the future here. So that was good. Expand renewable energy operations, support and expand. Well, yeah. Whew. Glad they're digging into that one. Provide utility customers with incentive to reduce energy use during peak hours. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is clearly where we're headed. This is the idea that when you load your dishwasher, you push delay and it starts at 2 a.m. because, electric grid goes like this when people come home from work and on hot days, and what utilities want and what's cheaper for ratepayers is for the usage to be like this. So when we think of charging your vehicle, we want that to happen at 3 a.m., not at 5 p.m. Right. And so
exactly.
We've been itching along in that way. So a lot of this peak, that's the so-called peak energy stuff. Expand energy conservation and fuel switching programs such as weatherization and converting to heat pumps. So, overall, these are all good. They're solid. They're clearly what we have to do. I sure hope the plan is going to not sort of have these broad generalizations, but, invest $20 million to do this. I will say for my seat in the legislature, I'm looking for a little bit more concrete direction, because the way I think of the council is we've put the targets, reduce emissions by X and Y and Z into law, and they're supposed to sort of say, how do you do that? Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Good stuff. Right. My summary, good stuff. Still a little vague for my taste, and I hope they put more details there. What about you? You had transportation you were going to walk us through, right? That's a big one.
Yes. Yeah. So the category that they're using to present this is really about the efficient transportation system as well as vehicles. So moving more of our vehicle miles to be fueled by electric vehicles and less by fossil fuels. And so the number one overarching recommendation that should come as no surprise to folks in the transportation realm is that the council subcommittee is moving towards recommending that Vermont join the Transportation and Climate Initiative. And so that's the initiative that's being planned up and down the eastern seaboard from Virginia and DC all the way up through New England. And the stage of the program that they're in right now is that a couple of states have come in and said, yep, we're moving forward with it. We need Vermont to join that crew in saying, yep, we are definitely in and we're moving towards it. TCI has been characterized by folks who are looking at what Vermont needs to do to meet its 2025 Paris climate goals. TCI has been characterized as being central, like essential. We can't get to 2025 just by our goodwill and our happy wishes that we would be more green.
And so hope is essential, but not enough, right?
That's right. Yes, exactly. And what does TCI offer? Well, it really offers a continuing revenue stream so that we can get more of our school bus fleet, moved into the electric realm, so that we can get more Vermonters on electric vehicles for their personal vehicle use, so that we can invest in public transit, so that we have more efficient systems and it is that, so there are more places around the state where you don't have to rely on your own vehicle to be able to get back and forth for essential services. The one thing that I think we need to be thinking about legislatively in terms of TCI, because I'm expecting that the recommendation will be to the Vermont's Agency of Natural Resources, go join TCI. So there may not be legislative act that needs to happen in order to move in that direction. But we do, as a legislature, need to consider what environmental justice looks like in the TCI realm. You know, we have to make sure that we are recognizing that that there are groups of people marginalized who living within our state for whom access to some of these programs has been elusive in the past. That's communities of color, that is rural communities, that is folks who are, you know, very low income and for whom, you know, buying an electric vehicle would be, you know, would be an out of the ballpark sort of aspiration. And we've got to make sure that we pass firm legislation, you know, sort of putting guideposts in how we will spend that revenue going forward.
The way I think of it is first of all, what I like about TCI, in addition, you said it's a reliable, dependable source of revenue for the state. It's also regional, because this stuff feels, you know, we hear how often do we hear this? Well, what can Vermont do on its own? We're a tiny population. Even if we were completely net zero, you know, it's not having a dent in the worldwide emissions. Well, we have to take care of our community. We have to do our part, but it sure is nice to join with neighbors, just even psychologically, to know that we're kind of in this together. And TCI is built on a very successful similar program for energy production that's effectively shut down coal in most of our region and is working to chip away at oil and natural gas. And so it's a successful model, it's regional, but because, you know, particularly I think of for households that are lower income, you know, their transportation budget to pay for their car to get 30 miles to work is a bigger chunk of their revenue. So it's in that way, we have to be very sensitive to it. I hope we can help folks get into, you know, a lot of pressure on electric vehicles. Clearly that's where we're headed, but get somebody out of a beater and put them in a more efficient vehicle. We've done little pieces of that program, but boy, they could do with an injection of resources to help folks, you know, instead of getting a 20 mile to the gallon vehicle, get into a 35 mile to the gallon vehicle, and then it's cheaper to operate, right? So very helpful. Yeah. But those are the sensitivities, as you mentioned, and really big challenge for the legislature to figure out how to approach that properly.
Right. And, you know, I expect that the Climate Solutions Caucus will continue to focus on that. We've got a working group that's coming together to help us think through, you know, what does equity mean when we get into session in January and we start thinking about implementing some of the recommendations. How are we doing that equitably? How are we making sure that we're not leaving Vermonters behind?
Yeah.
So there were a handful of other recommendations that I think, you know, fall into that category of sort of overly general and sort of no-brainer. Pursue federal funding to reduce emissions. Sure, yeah. I mean, we should see if there's ways that the federal government can help Vermonters. Direct federal investments to multimodal transportation in villages and downtowns. Yeah, that, you know, that makes a lot of sense. You know, those may be places where there's revenue coming in to help us help Vermonters. There's a couple of other specifics that I think are pretty interesting. Adopting a low emission vehicle standard. You know, we can
the California model.
Yeah, we can follow along. You know, Vermont isn't going to move the market simply by declaring that, you know, that all of our vehicles need to have a certain efficiency. But California, on the other hand, it very well does move the market. And if we adopt the standard that they're taking, that makes sense for the future of vehicle purchases.
And I always think it's amazing. I mean, we're not even a tenth of California's population, right? But just another state joining them helps them too, and helps. You know, I've seen this in a number of ways. Industries, big corporations, you know, the auto industry, they don't like the concept of multiple standards. They don't want to design a car that's legal in Massachusetts and different in Maine or Connecticut or Vermont.
Right.
And so when a couple of states do take these steps, and California is big enough to do it on its own, but when we join them and a couple others join them, then actually that becomes a de facto national standard. And it's a great way for our little state to put pressure on an industry. And frankly, sometimes they go to Congress, please, will you adopt this so that we don't have this piecemeal thing?
Right.
So it's not always intuitive, but I'm glad to see that being discussed.
Yeah. As you mentioned, the Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride programs that are sort of in their infancy and not nearly widespread enough across the state. The recommendation will be that we continue to expand those. That just makes sense to these are programs that will help folks who have lower incomes to be able to access some of these clean vehicles. One of the recommendations that may come forward is to design efficiency price adjustment linked to a vehicle. That's something that might happen at the point that you register a new vehicle. We know that it's a public good that we encourage Vermonters to start driving more fuel efficient vehicles, and so why not make it a little easier at the point where you're putting in your registration for folks who are driving those efficient vehicles.
Yeah, something. So no brand new ideas, but hopefully putting more details and more weight behind ideas that have been bandied around in some way for many years. And that's always been the vision, right, of the Climate Council is an independent, not totally political body coming forward saying, here's what you need to do.
Yep.
And then hopefully the legislature and the Scott administration react and say, all right, well, we do want to meet these goals, so we'll do it.
Exactly.
Good. So
what did you learn in terms of resiliency and working lands? What recommendations are going to come from the council around land use?
Well, we'll see. I must say these fall into more generalized, less detail than I need. Expand. So the first one's expand state of Vermont programs to cut emissions and promote the capture of carbon in soils. Well, yeah. Good idea. Now, how do we do that?
So, what does that look like? Right?
Yeah. Now, Sarah, as you know, I serve on the Senate Ag Committee, and we have been, I'm hopeful. It's one of these programs. So there's been a discussion for many years, and we've funded in a low-level way to keep the discussion going. And it's farmer-led around so-called ecosystem services, payment services. Yeah, I can't remember. But the idea is we need farmers to build soil. Soil absorbs carbon, soil absorbs runoff, and we have a lot of flooding. The healthier your soil, the less flooding. This is very important in phosphorus getting into our waterways, all these things. And so we've put these demands on farmers, but of course, in the dairy world especially, there's no commensurate uptick in dairy pricing, anything but. So The idea is there a way to actually measure this and acknowledge the value to society in a way that would reimburse farmers for providing this value?
Right.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of people working on it already. That's underway. And so this is sort of saying, keep going. I'd like it to say, this is a worthy idea and it should be funded in X, or and part of the very real challenge is figuring out the measurements, the metrics. Like, if your carbon level is X in your soil and you bring it to here, do we give you $2 or $25 or $2,000? None of us really can. So we need help. It's a good suggestion. We're already working there. I hope there'll be more meat there on the bones. And then this is similarly, forests, increase vegetation, protect rivers and wetlands through payment for ecosystem service programs. So, okay, yeah. Reconnect and restore river corridors and floodplains, such as adding berms and riparian buffers. So this is a similar. It's all in the soil zone and trying to stop further erosion.
Mhm.
This is one of those cases where you've got a water quality interest and an emission reduction in terms of sequestration interest. They align, and
Mhm.
that's valuable. Again, not exactly specifics yet. Um, and so here's a more specific, but not a dollar number. Increased funding for forest and natural land conservation in the state's 2022 budget. Okay. By the way, we did that in a record level last year already. So we're there. We're moving there. Conserve, here's something more specific. Conserve 55,000 acres per year from 2021 to 2030 and fund efforts to connect landscapes and increase resilience to climate impacts.
Mhm.
That's ambitious. That's
Yeah.
specific. That executing that will be tricky, but it's important to name these goals. And I appreciate that they're pushing there. Um, yeah, invest in farmland conservation, protect natural and working lands from development. Of course, I think we can be proud. We've been doing that since the 80s through the land trust and housing conservation board that was set up under the Cunin administration. So, I guess the general theme is keep doing what you're doing, do it more,
Mhm.
and
Right.
understand the land preservation, resistance to some development pressure, and how it fits into emission reduction and resilience. Actually, in some ways, because it's property rights and stuff, some of the more controversial things. So some good ideas there, but I sure do hope they'll hone them in and help us understand the right scale that they see. And that's an example of where the hectic pace that we've put the Climate Council on, because the science is we're so late, is probably going to need more time to really understand the data of, like they said, 55,000 acres. Is that, is it, I mean, that is a pretty specific number. So we'll see. But I for myself, I'm very eager for if I have to go to colleagues and say it's got to be this amount of money, otherwise we're only going to conserve 30,000 acres, and the science is saying clearly you got to land here.
Right.
We need stuff to back that up, I should think.
Yeah. Yeah, and in that whole category of sequestration and conservation and what is the right value to place if we're placing a dollar value. It just feels to me that there's so much more in the way of measurement and data and science that we need to have access to, and so it makes me really excited to see the list of people who are working on this at the council. And it also, occurs to me that this is going to be something that we're learning a lot about over the next 2 or 3 years in order to really ramp up some of these. Because, as you say, when you cross over into wanting to encourage or in some other way move people to a different land use pattern, it becomes really sticky really fast. So it's helpful for us to engage with Vermonters and help them understand why and how much of this we need to do.
Well, and we are in an affordable housing crisis too. So how does that dovetail together? Most of our investments in housing have been in designated downtowns. We've sort of understood that after more and more public discussion around sprawl, and sort of thoughtful land use. But we have to be an affordable place to live
Right.
as we start to enter, even if we are shifting a lot of habits, we're trying to inspire different habits around to handle the climate crisis. So that is not easy. It's going to be interesting. It will not be a one-year operation, I'm sure.
Right. Well, the need for housing and for it to be affordable is a nice segue into the last category, major category of recommendations coming out of the council, and that is around homes and their energy use.
Yeah, this
And
is
so,
our behind transportation. This is the other big
yeah,
emitter
right.
in Vermont. Yeah.
Yeah, our two biggest sources of emission being transportation and heating our buildings. And so there's a lot of recommendations that are being considered in that sort of thermal realm, if you will. And a lot of them, most of them are going to lead us to a place where our buildings are more efficient for us to own and live in and operate. And so that can only help Vermonters to keep more of their heating dollars in their own pocket instead of having to spend them, especially spending them on fossil fuel. So, we have this clean heat standard concept that we know came out of an EAN pitch last year and has been worked on by a working group of folks. This is the idea that you simply task the heating industry with shifting away from fossil fuels and into more efficient heat programs. What that does is it really invites the fossil fuel industry to shift the focus of their operation gradually over time, so that it's not as if we're all of a sudden putting all of the oil truck drivers out of business and they no longer have anything to do. Some of those folks may transition to delivering wood pellets for a wood pellet bio heating system. Some of them may get trained in installation or maintenance of cold climate heat pumps. And so this really, I think, is an opportunity to think about how we invite
the workers,
invite the workers and the focus of the business, invite them to be thinking about, okay, so here's where I go next to be able to stay in business. And we're already seeing some heating companies in the state do things like that. And that's part of why the council was built the way it was, to have somebody from the industry be sitting at the council table and helping to inform some of these transitions. Building energy code. Oh,
before we leave the clean heat standard, that was called,
yes.
You have Vermont Gas endorsing that idea. I mean, I think that's worth mentioning. I mean, that is unusual. This is a transition for an industry where the industry, and I just want to back up what you've kind of already said, where the industry is helping us design this. And, I don't want to be too optimistic, but that does seem like a recipe for success if we can pull it off, and if we're not battling the people whose, that is their business. Maybe we can do that. And if anyone could do that, it is in Vermont, where we're very community oriented, and you help your neighbor with some wood if they've run out. And I'm optimistic. That's a big one, and it will take years for sure, but I'm glad they're focused there.
Yeah, absolutely. Building labeling and energy codes are another no-brainer. And this is a concept that you and I have talked about when we were going out around the state in 2019 to talk about what we need to do in the future. And that is, when you're looking at buying a house, it would be helpful to know, what does it cost in energy to live comfortably in this house, so that when I look at this house that maybe is more expensive and this house that's less expensive, I can add in what I know about the efficiency of the heating system and the insulation in the home, because your less expensive house may not cost you less. In fact, it may cost you more if it's poorly insulated, if the heating systems are not efficient. So moving towards putting in place some sort of building labels is very important. And a lot of the recommendations in the building area really recognize this challenge that Vermonters who are renting have,
Yeah.
which is, I'm the tenant and I'm responsible for heating the place and I have to pay my own heating bill, but so therefore my landlord is not really interested in replacing the rattly old windows or making sure that there's, a good insulation layer around the outside of the building. And so just figuring out ways that we can help landlords to make their rental properties more efficient. It's more comfortable for the tenants. It's cheaper to live there. And like we've said all along, the dollar that you keep in your pocket because you didn't spend it on fossil fuels is a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the weatherization, sort of that the weatherization program that we know we need to ramp up. The council is really talking about making sure that we expand them. The recommendations will be that we put more money into it, although the initial public outreach didn't necessarily arrive on a number, but we can certainly hope that there's some specificity from the council about what pace at which we should be weatherizing. And also just providing some incentives to contractors to move towards installing heat pump systems or pellet systems, so that more of the folks that we call when the furnace breaks know how to guide us in getting renewable energy systems put into our house. Interesting.
There's so many, I hope people don't hear it saying, the state's coming for your furnace. There are a ton of interesting ideas. For instance, I was just hearing that if you have a natural gas air blower furnace system, duct system, there's a heat pump element that you can add in there. And so what that does is it has an electric efficient energy efficient component that still depends on your fossil fuel furnace, but uses it a lot less, right? So,
right, yeah.
And it can also, frankly, add some cooling there, which is more and more important as our summer heat waves hit, particularly for our senior community. So it is kind of, I remain ever hopeful. There's these sort of tech answers that the technology and the need are coming together. Whether we can do it in time, to a scale in time, and help it be realistic for Vermonters to afford, are huge questions. But that's where our work comes in Montpelier, and where we need all sorts of ideas from people at home. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the recommendations here on the buildings and thermal side really are about let's make sure that we are aligning so that your fuel company is interested in helping you, your electricity provider is interested in helping you, Efficiency Vermont maybe is out there doing educational programs, and we're really making it as easy as possible for folks to be able to decide to invest in weatherizing their home, and maybe with some grants to help folks who are in rental situations and folks who are homeowners but lower income, and aligning all of these efforts so that instead of a little bit here and a little bit there, it's really more of a push to really accelerate the pace at which we're moving away from fossil fuels in our heating systems. A lot of the things that they're calling for are also things that we can do locally within our communities. So, creating educational resources, that's something that we can be doing within our own energy committees. Energy committees can help, municipalities figure out how to be cheaper in their municipal buildings, but they can also develop programs to help their neighbors, right at the local level. Yeah, and particularly some apartment buildings, they can help move the needle there with contact with landlords. And interesting, by the way, when you were saying all of the disparate pieces from the utility to mortgage lenders and stuff, it's also contractors, which is something Sarah and I have been pushing on for a long time. This idea of a contractor registry, so that we already know who the electricians are, we already know who the plumbers are. The general contractors, it's more Wild West, and we need them coordinated, not in a heavy regulated way, but just in a way that like, hey, could we at least send them all a letter and say, here are the 10 incentives the state is offering right now. So that one isn't quite over the finish line, but it's making progress, that bill. And hopefully we'll execute that in January, get it to the governor. So many, I am heartened as we go through this list that a lot of these are not new ideas. So it makes me feel like we've been on the right track. And I sure do hope between the grassroots pressure and the climate council's sort of stamp of approval, it provides the momentum to really take it to the next level. The things that we've been doing a little bit, we need to do a lot. Things that we haven't had the courage yet to do, we can start doing. We'll see. Right. Big stakes.
It's pretty exciting. And there's a lot of work that you and I and our legislative colleagues on the Climate Solutions Caucus are going to need to do between now and January to really hone in on, what are out of all of these recommendations, what are the 3 to 5, legislative bills that need to move.
Right.
And then from among the other recommendations that are, of the category, do more of this, or, invest, X dollars, on this part of the solution, then it's going to be a matter of advocating for use of funds to really ramp up what we've already been doing. And that's where we're going to need Vermonters who are watching today to be engaged and to be willing to pick up the phone and say to their legislator, please support bills X, Y, and Z, and please support the use of this much money to help Vermonters move away from fossil fuel.
I think it makes me think of a sports analogy. When the Red Sox are going to the World Series, all sorts of little logos and stuff start appearing on people's cars, right? And they're driving around, and there's like this community feeling of
right.
Sports teams, our home team support kind of thing. We need something like that.
Yeah.
we need a Climate
flag. Nation.
Yeah, right. Go Vermont legislature. It's never going to happen. But
go climate team.
No. So folks, I totally agree, Sarah. This is a moment that's very special, not anything like I've seen in my time in Montpelier. And you and I and our colleagues are working really hard to make this successful, but make or break actually comes down to grassroots pressure and sort of insistence that, of course, you're going to do this, right? Doesn't matter if you're talking to a legislator that is on board or is never going to be on board. That conversation and that outside pressure is really vital for this to give us a shot, I think.
Absolutely. And so that's a perfect opportunity to say, please join our mailing list if you're not already on, so that when we get into session, we can send you an occasional action alert that says, today's the day that it would be really great for you to do this climate advocacy, and also forward this video to a friend, somebody else who maybe is hearing about climate, is open to getting involved, wants to understand more about what Vermont is going to do to help us meet our goals, and share this with them. We'll get more Vermonters involved, and we'll be able to move the needle further. This is also a perfect segue to introduce one of our future videos is going to be on, and which is we're going to have an interview with Iris Shang, who is one of the leaders of the Youth Climate Lobby, and she's going to join us and tell us about the work that our Youth Climate Lobby is doing to ramp up and help us move legislation in the future. So, this is their earth, this is their climate, and they are going to be here decades longer than even you or I, and we need to listen to them as they talk about what's important for them in the climate realm.
For sure. Sarah, I look forward to that conversation. Always great to see you, and thanks for being part of our team here. This is I couldn't do without you, and really appreciate all that you're putting into this, and it's hopefully we're successful.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for being a good partner in this. And let's keep plugging away at it.
Thanks to Bob the Green Guy for making these happen as well. We are indebted to him.
We really couldn't do it without Bob the Green Guy. It's true.
Great. See you soon.